Hey all, Jason Levon, priest at St. Luke's Episcopal Church, and welcome to another edition of Pause and Pray. One of the most profoundly holy invitations that I receive as a priest is when I'm invited to the bedside of somebody who's dying, who's making that sacred journey into the nearer presence of the living God. And I say profoundly holy because every time I can recall when I've drawn near to the bedside of one dying, I've come to experience this palpable, tangible sense of God's presence, of holiness. And I deliberately say tangible because it's not usually felt in any words that I utter, whether they're through the prayer book or from the prayer book or from my own heart, but rather tangible in the sense that I experience God's presence in holy and sacred touch. Whether that's on my part as the priest when we celebrate the sacrament of anointing of the sick, which I often do with those who are dying, which involves laying of hands on the head of the person in silence, just the power of touch, or the beautiful ways in which I see the family members of those who are dying draw near to them without words, but with the gift of holy touch. Maybe it's wiping the forehead with a cool, damp washcloth, or gently stroking their cheek, or maybe even just holding their hand and lingering there in sacred silence. I think of a concrete story of that. Shortly before this pandemic, we celebrated here at St. Luke's the funeral of a beloved gift to this parish for many, many decades. Joan was her name. She was a member here at St. Luke's for around 67 years, as long as she was married to her husband, Gus. And shortly before this pandemic began, Joan entered the dying process at a nearby hospital. I would visit her on a daily basis, and every time I walked into that hospital room, I would see the same thing. Her husband, Gus, of 67 years, sitting next to her bed, facing her, not saying anything, but simply holding her hand. After 67 years together, no words needed to be said. Just touching one another, holding each other's hand, spoke more than any words ever could, and reminded me again and again about just how tangible and touchable our God really is, and what a gift that is. The gospel for today's daily office reflects on that gift as it comes from Luke and tells the story of that woman with a hemorrhage who fights her way through the crowd, all believing that if she could just touch the hem of Jesus' garment, she would be made whole. And when she does, Jesus feels power going out of him and stops everything. And you come to see in part that one of the reasons why he stopped everything was because he wanted to savor that moment and the holiness of that touch. As he lifted up this woman's face and celebrated the energy, in a sense, that went out of him, but helped to restore a sense of peace and newness in her life. Today, we are invited to pause and pray about how we've come to experience the touchability and tangibility of our God. Maybe we experience it through those little hands that reach out to us, the gift of children. This past weekend was full of that experience for me, as my 2-year-old grandson would grab me by the finger and lead me all around, whether it was this courtyard or the big park we took a walk through, as he navigated with awe and wonder this great big world. And every time he grabbed my finger to lead me, I couldn't help but feel the touch of God in my life. Or maybe it's experienced through our beloved partners, where we don't really need words at all, but simply to take one another's hand and there find ourselves lingering in sacred silence and our lives touched by just how profoundly deep love can truly be. Or maybe we experience it in the hands that reach out to us when we've stumbled or feel like we're drowning. Or maybe it's the hands we're reaching out towards when we feel like we're drowning. But we also pray for the grace that we may become instruments of that divine love and light and peace, healing and strength, reaching out to others. Also that others can experience through our lives, what we continually experience and celebrate again and again. That holy touch of God, which dares to reach deeper into our lives, nearer to us than we could ever ask for or imagine. God's peace and blessings to you all.